but to talk about when identity becomes the attack path. Will you please welcome the Field CTO for Europe for CrowdStrike, Zeki Turedi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. So yes, we're going to talk about identity paths and the issues of identity, but I'm also going to talk about the problems we have in cybersecurity. We've kind of talked a few of these topics before already. I'm not going to just give you doom and gloom. What I want to give you is optimism. I'm going to talk about real-life security incidents, real-life threats, but also remember that as we talk about the incidents, there's 1,000 more security incidents that were able to be stopped and protected. So we can protect our organizations. And I'm also, at the end, I'm going to give you some takeaways of where I personally believe organizations need to focus in this new world, how our cyber strategy needs to be built with AI and all the other technology adoptions and the change in landscape. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the adversary. The reality is the adversary is the reason why we all sat in this room today. And it's also the reason why it's critical to talk about securing our identities. When we talk about the adversary, we're still talking about 3 core threat actor groups. We're talking about the nation state, the threat actor that is either working directly for a nation or is being backed by government or cause. We're talking about hacktivism, something really important for us to focus on today. There are so many different geopolitical changes, tensions. We've got a new war between the US and Israel with Iran. That causes us issues in the cybersecurity world, even if we believe we have no existence or no part of that conflict. So we need to be aware of these geopolitical changes and how, from a cybersecurity perspective, it could change how we, our own organizations, need to react. And of course, probably the biggest and most important threat for any organization should be either the first or second priority is understanding and be able to defend themselves from the ever-growing criminal ecosystem that we see. It has massively exploded over the last several years simply because criminal organizations have realized it's highly lucrative and quite easy to target businesses that are not thinking about cybersecurity. But really, this is what we're dealing with. This is the adversaries that we are tracking at CrowdStrike every single day. You may notice that we like to use strange and silly names to try and make it a little bit more fun in this game. But every single threat actor we track has a story. And more importantly, what we're seeing is, year over year, we're seeing a huge increase in new nation-state threat actors, as an example. More and more countries are realizing that actually cyber is a really good way of gaining intelligence on other countries. Gaining intellectual property and advancing your own research where you don't have the ability to do it yourself. We've got new countries like Kazakhstan to Belarus, starting up their own cybersecurity capabilities, offensive cybersecurity capabilities, and utilizing them on an active basis. But we also have the threat actors we've been tracking for a while. You notice we've got North Korea is the Cholima. We always focus on the national animal, and the national animal of North Korea is a mythical flying horse, which I think is perfect, and I'm still waiting for the pub quiz where I can get that answer right. But we also have the adversaries like Iran with the kitten. You may be thinking the kitten is not the national animal, it's actually the cat. But back in 2012, when we first started tracking Iran, they were a kitten. They were young, it was a new capability for them. But reality today is they have a highly sophisticated cyber operation. We've already talked about the speed of the adversary. And this is something that we need to be very, very aware of. And when I talk about the speed of the adversary, I'm not talking about just the best nation-state threat actors, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians. I'm actually talking about the criminal threat actors that we see every single day. And over the last several years, the speed and sophistication of these threat actors has massively evolved. So in 2025, the fastest of what we call the breakout time was 48 minutes. Now, 48 minutes for a breakout time is basically how long it takes a threat actor to get into your patient 0, be able to gather persistence, privilege escalation, do some reconnaissance, and then start laterally moving. It's the difference between going from a security incident to a security breach. Because the reality is when a threat actor, be it the best threat actor out there or a novice amateur criminal actor group, the second they start hitting multiple systems, it means they've got credentials, they've got access. You could have the best security team, it's still going to be a serious security incident to deal with and to remediate. So if you understand the speed of the threat actor, of course, we now know how fast we need to be. I think it's a really important metric because you can actually use this to reverse engineer your own operational capabilities. If you have a dashboard that powers your security teams and it updates every 2 hours, you're not going to hit the breakout time. So again, by understanding how quick the threat actor is, we understand how quick we need to be. And the unfortunate news for you is we need to be very quick. Last year, the average breakout time that we saw was 29 minutes. The fastest was 27 seconds. I used to make an excuse and say, can we do it as quick as making a coffee? I cannot make a coffee in 27 seconds unless I'm just throwing a load of things into a mug. But this is the speed that adversaries are able to operate. I'm not talking about AI. I'm not talking about huge amounts of automation. This is adversaries' capabilities before they start utilizing artificial intelligence and the new technologies that make it even easier for us. So now we understand the benchmark, but the reason they can do this is simply because they just log in. The threat actor that got 27 seconds was a threat actor called Punk Spider. Punk Spider targeted a victim, got access to credentials, and simply logged into the organization and started staging for ransomware and exfiltration. When we give the keys to the kingdom, of course the adversary can just walk in. So why can the adversary still just simply log into our organizations? And again, there's many reasons. When we look back, the adversary tactics has massively evolved. The world we are now trying to protect is very, very different. We have to remember that actually our own infrastructure, our own technologies that we use every day to allow our employees to do their job is so varyingly different from the last 12 months, never mind the last 24 or few years ago. So the adversary is very aware of this. The adversary doesn't just hit one machine. They get in and they move wide and far as quickly as possible. They know that your business's secret source no longer just sits at a physical data center. They know it sits in many different places. And they jump around these different locations very, very rapidly to get access to the information they want. What we see is the adversary is cross-domain. And what I mean by that is they will jump to every technology and resource they have available. A really good example of this is Scatter Spider. Scatter Spider, you probably heard them frequently last summer. There was some very, very notoriously large data breaches and incidents where they were involved. Since then, they've kind of morphed, evolved. Some of them have ended up in prison in the US. But the reality is, Scatter Spider taught a lot of other criminal actor groups new methods and new techniques. Scatter Spider was basically a bunch of late teens, early 20-year-old individuals. And they were inquisitive. So when they got into an organization's network, they basically clicked on everything they had access to. Didn't know what it was, they clicked on it and worked out where it went and what data was in there. They were inquisitive. And that taught a lot of other criminal groups that sensitive data doesn't sit in the usual places. It's not just in SharePoint, it's in your SaaS platforms. It's your CRM that sits in the cloud. It's your virtual machine environment that you still have running in the corner. The data is everywhere, and the adversary will go for it. But as well as that, we see a change in the adversary landscape and where the adversaries are focusing on. We've already kind of talked about China from a higher level perspective. But again, China is a nation state that is actively targeting organizations across Europe looking to gather intellectual property. Their focus is on anything to help the regime, help the government. And so much so, they follow their 5-year plan to a T. So a really good way of understanding if you've got to have a Chinese nation state knocking your door is understand what is the focus of China's government. Are you working in biotech? Are you working in semiconductors or manufacturing of chips? Most likely, there's going to be of interest. China is highly capable. And one of the really key things we saw over the last 12 months is their ability to take vulnerabilities and weaponize them in very, very short timescales. And these are not 0 days that are unknown. These are patches that have been released publicly. And what they do is they find that patch, they reverse engineer it and understand what the vulnerability is, and then actually build the exploitation tools to go and exploit that vulnerability. And they are very highly effective at doing this because they realize and understand organizations are just really bad at patching at speed and pace. This is something we need to be aware of and be highly cautious, especially with this new generation of frontier AI models. As well as that, we've seen various ways of supply chain targeting and how organizations are becoming vulnerable to initial access. We see that the adversaries are continuously harnessing the mistrust on technologies. I'll give you a good example. Pipey. Pipey is a common tool. It's used to download libraries and other tool sets. You probably played around with it or installed it. You definitely have it running in your own organization. It's trusted. It allows you to download various tools pretty rapidly and easily. It's a nice big library of capabilities. We're seeing nearly every single day, actually a new one came out yesterday, of the libraries that sit in that repository being taken over and misused. There was one yesterday where, again, it was quite a sophisticated targeting, where they were able to take that library, they were able to inject malicious code into an open pull request, and from there, they were able to steal the GitHub OAuth token to allow them to push their own malicious code into that library. And what that meant was anyone accidentally updating or downloading it again got pushed an info stealer. Now, this info stealer wasn't highly sophisticated. It was looking for things like usernames, passwords for Google Cloud, AWS. It was looking for wallets, cryptocurrency wallets. But again, this is a tool set that was used by large enterprises, and again, going after the cloud information. On the other side, we see the amount of organizations interested in new technologies, like Claude is a good example. Cookie Spider, a threat actor that we track, has been routinely creating fake Claude download pages for both Windows and Mac OS and directing individuals to their sites. Again, jumping on the hype cycle of people wanting to use these technologies and accidentally downloading malicious tool sets. And the way they get them to download them is in various ways that actually bypasses a lot of the security controls you have in your systems. And their focus is to get access to those credentials so they can do further harm to the organization. We've talked about zero-day targeting, and again, this is something we need to be really aware of. Not only do we see threat actors like China, but also criminal actor groups being able to reverse engineer those patches, we still see a huge amount of threat actors tracking brand new 0 days and looking to weaponize them. The reality is, not every vulnerability is being looked at. They're looking at the vulnerabilities on the edge devices, unmanaged devices, so they can use them as the initial stakehold to be able to then target within the organization. And lastly, subverting trust. We see frequently the threat actor trying to use and misuse trust on a frequent basis. We had a few examples already. But I think one of the ones we spoke about this morning was phishing, voice phishing. This has been a detrimental change in the tactics used by threat actors. Again, something that became quite notorious with the threat actor group Scatter Spider. We now see being used by a huge range of threat actors. One we saw just a couple of days ago was done through a threat actor group called Snarky Spider. I don't make all the names, by the way, but there's a story behind them all. So, Snarky Spider. Snarky Spider simply utilized voice phishing to target an individual and basically impersonate as being the IT help desk. But they weren't trying to get access to the organization. They were basically pushing malicious OAuth authentications to the individual. And they believed they were just doing the right thing for accepting it. Because again, they were able to gain access to that identity already, just not through the authentication process. So they were able to bypass those security controls that organization had. What we also saw was the fact that they were able to then use something like a quick assist, but there's many variations of the tools, to be able to actually then get full remote access to the system. So again, they are the kind of top areas that we see where we see threat actors targeting organizations. But we also need to remember that the threat actor has massively evolved. They have moved with the technology landscape. And we need to be aware of and ready for, that as we adopt new technologies, that security is part of this process. But the reality is, we take into all those different threat actors and the techniques and capabilities they have, they're still really focusing on a number of key areas. They're looking for compromised credentials. There's typically malicious access, some type of adversary in the middle activity, or trying to target the organization. There's still privilege abuse. There's still lateral movement. And then again, a lot of what we see, a lot of the targets and the attacks still happen from within the browser itself. So although the adversary has massively evolved, the adversary's tactics have massively changed, it's still highly concentrated on the user, the browser, and the identity. Well, again, we have to remember this also changes rapidly when we talk about the AI adoption. Frontier AI models have a potential to really change how we should approach security incidents and security problems. First of all, we have to realize that there's going to be a potential increase in the amount of vulnerabilities our organizations need to deal with. So be prepared for not just one vulnerability to patch a day, but potentially hundreds of vulnerabilities being disclosed, needing to be remediated. But the reality is we don't need to go and patch them fast. We need to patch them smart. You can't go and patch every single new vulnerability. But on the other side, we have to remember that we will no longer just be dealing with one security incident at a time. Most security teams are truly set up to deal with one security incident. They have an open ticket, they run through the investigation, they close the ticket. With Frontier AI, organizations could be dealing with thousands of simultaneous incidents happening at the same time. Organizations need to realize that they're going to have to be able to deal with that scale and velocity, and that just can't be humans dealing with investigations. It's how can we harness technology to help us go through that vast amount of data, the vast amount of noise, and understand what's the real incident. So things are going to very, very rapidly change. But again, by having the right preventative controls, the right areas to focus on, we can bring a lot of pain to the adversary. So even though they may be running thousands of simultaneous attacks, we know based on our security defense and our strategy that they can't keep moving forward. We can keep and push them back. We have to make sure that the technologies we're implementing work for us and can work for us for the modern adversary. So there's a couple of questions that I think you should be asking yourself when we talk about your security strategy, and especially when we talk about identity. First of all, do we have the context necessary to really, truly understand who is making a request, who is trying to access our organization? How much data and context do we actually have on the identity itself? And what I mean by that is this user exposed? Is this vulnerable, misconfigured? What device they're coming from? Can we verify that it's really them? Not just about pushing multi-factor authentication. Do we have other contexts and signals that can truly validate they are who we believe they are? How are they trying to get access to our systems? Are they approved processes? What privileges do they require? Why do they want privileges? Should they have privileges in this situation? And again, when should we revoke access? Think about our infrastructure as an onion. In security, we love onions. I don't know why, we never eat them. But again, in cybersecurity, we need to remember that we are dealing with layers of defense. And we have massive amounts of opportunities within our defense architecture and strategy to push away the adversary. So first of all, we need to make sure we've got that complete visibility. And what I mean by visibility is those cross-domain environments, we are able to see every single one of them. Our security strategy doesn't stop on one technology. It's able to be spread and is on par for all the technologies we're implementing in our organization. But not only that, we can use the data, the signals, the telemetry from that environment to provide context, which we can share across all of our technologies. We need to also make sure we do the basics. We talked about the basics in the first session. And identity access management is typically somewhere where we have forgotten about good hygiene. But good and great hygiene in this area brings pain to the adversary. Upgrade our authentication. There are some fantastic technologies out there, phish-resistant technologies, that again could allow us to improve massively how we can authenticate and trust the individuals in our organization. Bring in secure risk-based access. Take that data, that context, that visibility, and make sure we're utilizing it. Remove things like standing privileges. Users should not have the privilege to access anything in our organization at any time. Go back to that 27 seconds. The reason why that threat actor was so quick was because they logged in and that user had access, even if they didn't have real business reasons or legitimate reasons at that time to have access. So remove standing access. If they don't need it, they shouldn't have it. And that, again, stops and brings huge amounts of pain to the organization. And lastly, we also should be welcoming AI. We talk a lot about the concerns of AI in our organizations, but we have an opportunity to utilize AI ourselves. We are all technologists. I think the great thing about the cybersecurity community is we are all geeks. We love brand new technology. And we have the opportunity to actually implement and use the greatest technologies ever in our own platforms and our own strategies. And this space is massively moving and evolving so quickly. And we should be part of it, not just letting the threat actors gain access to it and the threat actors use it against organizations. But the second time, we also need to realize that these are brand new technologies that are coming into our own organizations. So we need to be prepared. We need to make sure security is not left behind. Security is part of the policy, the guardrails, the development and implementation process of AI technologies coming into your own organization as well. Because we don't want to make the similar mistakes we've done previously. We talked about a lot of the different tactics used by adversaries, and one of them, of course, is their focus on cloud, because they understand it's a soft area, a soft part of most organizations' networks, because cybersecurity wasn't invested in. So let's not make that mistake when it comes to AI and AI's implementation in our organization. So hopefully, that was a kind of whistle-stop tour of the landscape, what we're seeing today, the evolution of the threat actors, some of the key tactics and techniques, but also where we believe we have an opportunity to focus on, to actually forget about the noise of AI and other capabilities, but really bring pain to the adversary, slow them down, even if they are harnessing tools and capabilities like AI. So thank you very much.